Hi, I'm Alyssa, and welcome to Art This Week. On this week's episode, we continue our coverage of the Moderns exhibition, Mexico Inside Out, Themes in Art Since 1990. Today, we speak with the artist Melanie Smithi about her work in the exhibition. Now for Art This Week.
We are here with Melanie Smithi, who has several works in the Mexico Inside Out show at the Fort Worth Modern. Thank you for being here with me today, Melanie.
Oh, thank you.
I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about what works you have here in the show. We're standing in front of Vanishing Landscape number 6 and also Spiral City 12, which were made in 2004 and 2005 respectively.
That's right, yeah.
So can you talk a little bit about the processes through which you came to making these paintings and where they came from? Because you also have the video Spiral City that is shown in the other room.
Well, these paintings, I guess, in the series of this body of work, there's probably up to 30 of these paintings, and they're all done with airbrush, and they're all done thinking of the video of Spiral City, which was done in 2002. So, in a way, Spiral City was the inspiration for these paintings, and probably it would help just to describe a little bit, the video first, which is a helicopter shot of Iztapalapa, which is on the southeast side of Mexico City, just near the airport. And I chose that area for its lack of green presence, no trees, no parks, because it's a very highly densely populated area, one of the poor areas of Mexico City. And also for its lack of monuments. I chose it almost as like a satellite area of the city, where there is no sense of center, and there's this sense of it being part of another bigger, greater, larger being, which is not shown in the video, but it's understanding. Also, a helicopter in the video makes a spiral, the movement around the area, so everything has this sort of groundless sensation, where the grid also goes spiraling at the same time. Thinking, obviously, in the work of the Spiral Jetty by Robert Smithson, and this piece, the video piece, is called Spiral City. So it was a kind of play on Smithson's sense of entropy, Smithson's sense of erosion of the landscape, and I was sort of translating his, in a sense, construction of that sort of natural or geological environment, and sort of translating that onto the urban environment. So then these paintings become, in a sense, these sort of cartographies of almost like jigsaw puzzles that don't really fit, and they are, as you can see, quite kind of photographic in nature, and a lot of people have told me that they have a kind of fuzzy sense of depth, but at the same time, when you look at them, there's no texture on them, really, or very little.
Right. That's true.
Yeah, so I think it's quite a strange kind of play, if you want, on how they almost there is a kind of fuzziness in the fact that the closer you come, the less you see of them. The further you go, the more you see. And I think the city, in a sense, is a little bit like that as well. The more macro you go, the less you see.
Actually, I wanted to ask you about that as well. So you have all of these works that are very consumed with the urban landscape and this overarching architectural structure of things, or the grid, or how these materials come together. But then you also have a dichotomy with interest with the individual little elements that make up the whole, and how do you express that within your process? Where does that interest come from, that kind of play with those two elements?
Well, I think it's you know, in a sense, yeah, my focus is, I guess it's through the experience of being in the city itself, is being focused almost on the monstrous, because Mexico City is out of proportion and it's out of scale itself.
Yeah.
And then always there's that question as an artist and as a subject, is that who am I within all that, you know, sort of monstrous environment, you know. So, and then if we think about the work of Aztec Stadium, where again, yeah, there is this play between the individual and the mass. I guess there I'm thinking more of that in almost a revolutionary or post-revolutionary state, you know, of like what would the mass mean in a today, in this kind of era of post-revolutionary Arab Spring and all that stuff, and then the individual as this kind of potential force somehow, yeah.
A catalyst.
Yes. Yeah.
So speaking of Aztec Stadium, can you talk a little bit about the history of the stadium itself and why you chose that as a site for this performative-based work?
Yeah, well, it was built in the around the time of the Olympics were held in Mexico in '68. And it's built by the architect Pedro Ramirez Vázquez, who was an architect who built a lot of the iconic buildings, museums, stadiums, and so forth in Mexico City. So he was an architect associated with power and the state. So that was one of the reasons for choosing it within the context of this project, which was also a project made for the 2010 bicentenary celebrations, a kind of, if you want, almost a subversive answer to the official celebrations which were going on in Mexico at the time. And then thirdly, the project was made in collaboration with Fundación Televisa, who own the Aztec Stadium. So it was also a project where Televisa became part of the project. They also have their own version of the piece. Really? And so it was a sort of working with and against the institution somehow. So it was an interesting experience.
I didn't know about that. Okay, so the video features children, students, 3,000 students? 3,000. With these photographs that they're holding up, that all together, the deconstructed parts of an image, that when they're held up together, they make an entire image. But inevitably, these things break down. And can you talk a little bit about what that was like to try and orchestrate 3,000 students and what happened?
Well, the day, I mean, as you can imagine, it was a very big project. It was hard to get 3,000 kids to begin with, because if you imagine that requires 3,000 permits from parents, that requires 80 school buses, that requires 6,000 school lunches, and 80 helpers to be, you know, administering and filtering these kids to the place where they had to sit, etc. So we didn't have a chance for rehearsal, and I knew that this was going to be a one-off kind of performative action, and I knew that I was playing with the idea of accident, and it was quite an accident in the end, but I think we had to go with that kind of ensuing chaos that happened, the way that the image, you know, sometimes came together and then it sometimes fell apart. You know, that I think that was, you know, we obviously were not going for a Korean style formation, and you know how this the image would be kind of oscillated. I mean, I think in a sense one of the interesting things about the project is how this oscillation of an image in appearing image and a disappearing image is one of the interesting things of the project. To work with them was a nightmare. It was really hard. You know, they didn't take much notice of us. Rafael Ortega, who's my collaborator, was directing with them, and I was more concentrated on the screens. He did a good job at points in trying to, get the rows and the images all together. It wasn't an easy job because we'd never done anything like that. To know how big each of the flashcards had to be, and would they form the image, was the size right, was the measuring right, was just getting them off the racks from the printers to the place, it was a logistical nightmare.
I was very impressed with how well everything, like the images actually looked amazing, and how coordinated they were. It was
but they're not, I mean, in the image of the Patria, which is on the image which is on the front of all school textbooks, that suddenly the mouth becomes, like 4 places further down than it really should be. And it was a deconstruction of, these iconographies, which were not only Mexican, but the image of Malevich, which is on the
red square,
the red square on the football pitch, which was very, I think, symbolic and articulated the rest of the images around that sole image there in the center.
Can you talk about the specific images that you chose?
One was, as I said before, the Patria, which is the textbook image on front of all textbooks. The second was Xepetotec, which is a Mexican Aztec mask of appearance, paralleled with Santo, who is, for those who don't know, is the famous luchador, Mexican luchador or wrestler. So again, working with these 2 parallels of appearance and covering, masking and covering. And then another painting of the Angel of Independence by Berriesca. And then a map of Mexico. And then we also work with a transparent image, trying to work with this idea of transparency. What would the idea of a non-image, what would that be? And then Malevich in the center. And the last image was the Nacimiento de Pulque, which was like a famous photograph used for a famous painting. There was stuff
lots
coming
of
from
sources and histories and time periods and locations.
All anchored really around the suprematist, model of abstraction, the breaking of the rectangle, of the breaking of that utopian moment of suprematism, the breaking of that moment between representation and abstraction. And I think probably the biggest question which I still have, which comes out at the end of that project when the rectangle gets broken, is what happened at that moment. What is that? What does that represent, that moment? That kind of illusion or disillusion of the breaking of the rectangle, which is another really big sort of question in my work, is the rectangle itself, How does the rectangle from the, let's say, the plastic, the painting rectangle, the canvas, how does that get put into a geopolitical rectangle? The breaking of the frame, the breaking of the rectangle.
Also, I wanted to know a little bit about the sound piece and how that plays into the video as well.
The sound for the Aztec Stadium? Yeah, that was made actually the next day with a guitarist thinking of, Jimi Hendrix, Star Spangled Banner.
Yeah.
It was a Mexican revolutionary march put into electric guitar and then put into the space there.
So the children weren't listening to that song?
We tried that, but it was complete chaos.
Yeah.
So the next day we did a re-recording of that, and then in a sense the whole action just had to fit within that one sort of epic song.
You were instrumental in this whole sort of movement of artists that were making work at this time in Mexico City, and what has it been like working with those artists throughout the years and then again in this space?
Well, you know, we're friends, close friends, so we've all seen each other's careers, you know, chop and change, and you know, I think back then in the beginning of the 90s, it was a very close moment because we all lived very close in we had studio spaces which were very close and saw each other a lot. And then since, you know, of course now it's, you know, everybody's got families and it's you know, there's not that same sense of sort of the moment and the closeness. But of course they're my most influential artists in a sense, because, you know, we all know so closely each other's works and dialogues, and of course they are still incredibly important on how I refer to what I'm doing as well. Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, well, thank you very much.
Not at all. Thank you.
It's been lovely speaking with you.
We want to thank Melanie for speaking with us. For more information on her, go to melaniesmith.net. For more information on the exhibition, go to themodern.org. That's it for Art This Week. Thanks for watching.
I still got your Polaroid.